you to give us the 15th century spelling of weird, where it came from, and how you've leveraged it, because this is something that I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, how are we not going back to the old spelling?
Well, because it would sound like wired. It's Old English. It's WYRD. It wasn't until Shakespeare's Weird Sisters that it became this negative connotation. Before, it had a different meaning. It meant the power to control or influence your fate, destiny, and my personal favorite, supernatural qualities. Essentially, your weird is your genius. And this is something that so many people underestimate, because most of us, when we get spit out the corporate back end and we get spit out of the system and we feel lost in the matrix all of a sudden, one of the reckonings is realizing, who am I? What am I? And so I think that life, the universe, whatever you want to call it, allows for us to go through these moments because we'll really get into the questions, not so much the answers, but the questions, because those are the most powerful component.
The idea of job security is outdated as a landline. If you haven't been in a search for a while, it's probable you will at some point, by choice or not. Most executives admit to staying way too long, or sense what's coming and justify staying anyway. Here, there's another reason. The faulty belief that navigating to what's next will inevitably be worse and has to suck. Screw that. Lauren Greif has spent a lifetime in corporate and executive search, calling bullshit on stale career advice that most still use. This is Career Blast in a Half, the career podcast for executives ready to cut past outdated career advice to fuel your outcomes now. So let's go.
All right. So we got two incredible, we have like the Reese's peanut butter cup of conversations going on here today. What does weird and disruption have to do with each other? And why are we talking about it now in this climate? Welcome to this episode today with none other than Frankie Russo, incredible TEDx speaker times 2 and 3, author, keynote speaker, and really one of the key accelerators behind this notion of your secret sauce and your weirdness. And Frankie, I met you through somebody else that we both greatly admire. And when we met, I just knew that your message would not just have power for my audience, but help anybody who's had a couple face plants in their life, and also help them really see things from a very different perspective for the wins personally and professionally. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, of course, Lauren. I am super excited about this and just can't thank you enough for having me on and what's about to happen.
So in the earlier part of your, entrepreneurial career, and you got into this thing very young, right? Like thanks to your bro, you started like getting into entrepreneurial life like in college. Right?
Well, technically in high school.
In high school. Okay.
Yeah.
So technically in high school.
So I wasn't officially incorporated, and I didn't know I was in it till hindsight. But in high school, there was an English teacher who really loved quotes from Gandhi. And so he had this crazy idea to have people, if they show up in a T-shirt from Gandhi with one of his quotes, they would get 100 on a test. All right. So there was this need, right? So people wanted 100 on a test, but there was this demand over here, and the supply was empty. And so I didn't know all the terms at the time, but I stepped into the supply part and I created the T-shirts. They cost probably $4, $5, $6, and I sold them for $10. And all of a sudden I realized, holy crap, this is a thing. If you just can, I don't even have to make the T-shirts. I can just get people what they need, and you can make money. And so that was my first entrepreneur. The quote was, "Did you have a good bowel movement this morning, sisters?" Which is one of Gandhi's favorite quotes. Apparently there's a lot of power tied to bowel movements. I don't know. But it was a brown shirt to make it even funnier. But the English teacher, Mr. Orteza, if he's out there, I drop his name every once in a while. I don't know how many people drop Arsenio Orteza's name these days, but he gave everybody 100, and it was this first moment of like, well, wait a second. And so it kind of just went from there. So that was pre Brother Giorgio. I had a couple of things like that. And then after, so yes, it's been an early journey. Didn't know I was an entrepreneur, but it turns out I was at an earlier age. Didn't know what an entrepreneur was, but.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I love a good ethical bribe. That was a good one. That was a really good one. But in those times, like, did you think when you were in, HS and moving on to other things, like, oh, it's going to be this cakewalk, right? Like, look, I did it over here. I'm going to do it over here. And like,
no. I didn't think things would be a cakewalk till years later. Okay. So yeah. So I did go through a cakewalk stage. All right. So, but back then I didn't even know what was happening. I just knew, man, that was cool. That was interesting. Learned a little something, kind of like forgot about it. It didn't become like a t-shirt business. And so then from there, fast forward a few more years, probably 4 years from then, I was waiting tables in a restaurant. And I was one of those folks that was always kind of like looking and imagining what could be. And so I realized early on that everything you need to know to be a millionaire, you can learn in a restaurant. By the way, because as a waiter, you're delivering somebody else's product, but you're the face of it, so you feel the brunt of the emotional component. And if you just show up, you're not going to necessarily get paid, and you do get paid based on performance. So all of a sudden, it's like, okay, this is interesting. But most people think, oh, this is just a job you get because you can't get any other jobs. But there's a lot you can learn from that. And here's one of the things that happened. I was so passionate about what I did and so into what I did. One time, I waited on a lady who was the former vice president of Fannie Mae. Now, of course, Fannie Mae to me at that time was just some grandma's name. I didn't know what the heck that meant. And she said, son, you need to come work for me and sell mortgages. Now, again, I didn't even know what a mortgage was, but I was like, yes, ma'am, I do. And so I did. I went and sell mortgages. Now, this was in the year 2000. Now, if you know anything about what happened between the time of 2000 and 2008, as it relates to mortgages, you could not have been an easier time to get literally anybody into a house. And of course, I didn't know that the entire government had been deregulated to a point that it would destroy the global economy. I didn't know any of that. I just thought, well, hell, we're making the American dream happen. I mean, why rent a house when you can own a house? And I'm thinking, okay, wow, this is entrepreneurship. So all my friends start working for me. I essentially become this like South Louisiana Cajun Wolf of Wall Street. And I'm thinking, okay, well, this is perfect. Everything I touch is going to turn to gold. So this was the moment where I thought, oh yeah, I got this. I figured this out. And of course, at the same time, I'm a raging drug addict alcoholic, which is a recipe for just absolute disaster, which hit in 2008 when I lost everything, all my relationships, family, had to walk to work for a year after driving a sports car and after making all this money. And it was this total reckoning. And that was the year that I had to get sober from drugs and alcohol as well. So 2008 crash was quite a crash for me. And I'm not alone on that, but it was coming off of this idea that like, okay, all that matters is making money. I thought that was the objective. And when all that matters is making money, it's a very, very dangerous place to be. Because that means that you will do anything to achieve that goal, especially if you're a determined person. And so that being the goal becomes the problem. Luckily for me, I had a bottom, and this tragedy happened that ripped it out of my hands, because otherwise I don't know where I'd be.
Okay, wait, I need to stop right now. Because you just said something that was literally like, if I had a mic, I'd be dropping it. You said, luckily for me, I had, this tragedy, this bottom, this thing, right?
Yes.
And so this probably sounds very counterintuitive, especially to many people in our listening audience who might be saying to themselves, yeah, good for you, Frankie, good for you. Like, that's your story. I'm sorry to hear about that. Wah, wah. But why is
no need to cry.
Right. Why is a bottom? And for many executives, it could be losing their job. It could be
100%.
losing a title. It could be losing their identity and the structure of their day. It could be, putting some of their relationships, family and otherwise, at risk. Why is that something that could actually be the best thing that ever happened to them?
First of all, it absolutely is the best thing that ever happened to him. Now, of course, it doesn't feel like that because your livelihood is being threatened. And what you've held on to for so long is being threatened. Okay? But we have two choices in this life. And I know this now in hindsight. I'm 43. I've gone through several other bottoms and other things like that. But the one thing I've learned in this life is that true growth, limitless, continuous growth does not come from success. In fact, it stops because of success. It stops because of success. Growth comes from failure. And failure becomes, once it becomes not only a gift, but celebrated, that's when failure becomes your superpower. It is so important. Now, when you're going through that 6, 12, 18-month threshold of hell, it's incredibly painful and incredibly uncomfortable. But this is the stuff that life is made of. And what happens for most of us is that we're so good at the same. We've gotten so good and so successful at how we got here that we've forgotten what growth looks like. We've forgotten what it was like at the beginning, right? At the beginning when we had nothing to lose and we weren't afraid of failure. Once I get into a place, like I'm in an uncomfortable transition right now. I sold my company and then now I've got this, I had this consulting gig. The consulting gig is now up. And I realized recently, Lauren, that I have been in a money coma. I'll be honest with you. I've been in a money coma, right? And it happens. This is what a lot of your audience, they're in the same boat. Oh. You lose a big job that you don't know how to replace. You know what you call that? A money coma. And most of the audience has been in it. So I'm with you. I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, but for the last 3 years, I had this cush thing because I sold my company. Now that thing ends in 42 days. So what's interesting about that is that of course the first reaction is like, oh, like what am I going to have to do, adjust? And I do. You got to make some adjustments because I'm building new businesses, but they're still being built. I'm invested in things that it's not there. It's not just automatically replaced.
And wait, just for added, sprinkling here. How many kids do you have?
6.
6.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah, there you go. So let's be a bit.
Pepper in a couple of doses of
That's
reality.
right. I got 6 kids. It's blended. I got a new wife. I've got this old wife that wants to take all the money. You've got all kinds. So if you're thinking oh, this guy's got the perfect life, just forget about that. So there's plenty of things to get scared about, right? And these kids are young. It's like 6 to 14, right? So there's a lot going on.
You mean there's college potentially coming up?
There's 4 girls. So there's weddings. I mean, it's terrible. So it's not like there's not a reason to be afraid. There absolutely is. And I have an option of what I can do with that. Now, this doesn't have to be a big bottom for me, and it won't be. Because it's probably the 5th or 6th iteration of bottoms that I've gone through. They're usually about every 5 to 7 years, right? You've heard of these cycles. Like if you haven't had a bottom in 6.5 years, like
you're due.
Yeah, listen up. Because
up.
it's coming. Yeah, because like 7 years ago was my divorce, and like here we go, and I'll have another one in 7 years. And I don't like bottoms. I would love to stay 8 years ago, but but it's it's not an exact science. 7, 8 years. All right, but here's the thing. The big thing for me that I've realized is that each time I go through something difficult, each time I go through a quote bottom, right? It doesn't go quite as low and it doesn't go quite as long. And that's the key that we're trying to build the muscle on. You will never not feel pain. You will never not feel fear of the failure. All it is how that we translate that quicker into something we can do with it. And that can't be done alone, by the way. Like I'm not going through this alone anymore. I'm going through this with my wife. I'm going through this with mentors. I'm going through this with colleagues. I'm going through this with a lot of people.
Sign me up. I'll go with it.
I'm going through this with Lauren. Yeah. So we're going through this. We're going through it right now. Right. So we're going to continue to go through it. So what happens though, is that as we start to realize the gold that are these bottoms, are these valleys, is this pain, is this discomfort, that becomes the gold. And so you not only suffer through it, you not only find acceptance in it, you start to see it coming and you're like, something big is coming. And Lauren, something big is coming. Something very big is coming in my life. I don't know exactly what it is. I believe it's a movement. I believe it will be called something like the new world of work, but I don't know how exactly we're going to get there. I don't even know how we're going to pay for it yet. But I know it's coming, and I know one thing. If I stayed in that stagnation spiral that I've been living in the last 2.5 years of status quo, denial that this will never end, being okay with silos and that being your problem, having these rigid beliefs about this world is the world I want to stay in, it's comfortable, and somewhat disengaged. If I stay in that, you know what will never happen? That movement will never happen. And so we must lean into what can be. We must lean into what we don't even know is possible, that we've been standing in the way of. The job you just lost has been in the way of what you're supposed to be doing. Full stop.
Right.
Full stop.
And really, in many ways, like a snake that molts, or, you know, a butterfly comes out of the cocoon. Spare me, I know the cliches, but it's really true, because you can't be that version. The old version it has its evolution. It's moving on, right? Yeah. And the world is moving on too, which is what I want to tie this into, right? Yeah, the world is moving on, right? And I want to tie this into some weirdness, because I made a promise at the beginning of this show that we were going to
let's get weird. Let's get weird.
You know, two kind of seemingly very weird things together and make a Reese's peanut butter cup in real life. So first, we talked about breaking your why, right? Mm-hmm. And I would love for you to give a little bit of a snapshot on why we want to break it.
Yep.
And then how we can all leverage our why in this place of crazy disruption, and why weird is part of your winning strategy.
That's it. All right, cool. I'll give you the quick version. So the reason I break why is because when I first started, I thought it was an art form. So my first book was The Art of Why. And so I had to destroy that once I went through more life and realized there's nothing artful about it. It's more of a breaking deal. And you said there was a cliche about the caterpillar to the butterfly, but here's the thing that you want to lean into that's not as cliche: the disgusting goo that's unrecognizable in the cocoon. That is what my wife calls the messy middle. She loves talking about the messy middle. Anytime I try to get too clean and I'm doing a metaphor that just shows a picture of a caterpillar and then a butterfly, she's like, nope, that's not how it actually works. It's dirty, it's messy, and it's weird. And you don't understand what it is when you're in the middle of it. And that's the transformation that you were just talking about. So while it may seem cliche, if you go into the middle of the gooey part that people don't focus on, that's the key. That's the key.
So it's like butterfly snot.
Yes, it's disgusting. It's messy. It's weird. And so that part is the part that is so important, because without that messy middle, without these transitional moments, we don't have transformation. You just can't have it without deep pain. Evolution doesn't happen without extreme pressure over a certain amount of time. And so everybody's like, oh yeah, I want to evolve. I want to reinvent. It's like, well,
right.
Careful what you wish for.
I embrace change, right?
Yeah,
like
careful what you wish for. Yeah. We embrace change when it's like on a 150-foot LED screen and we're all like cheersing a beer or whatever. But like, yeah, no, embracing change is very, very painful, right? And so the reason to break your why is because it's constantly a process of either I break my why or it breaks me. So the fact is that I've got to continue to dig in. And why is quite simply just your purpose. Why is just another word for purpose. And for a long time, I spoke on purpose and things like that. And I had this issue where a lot of times it was too kind of pie in the sky. It was too hard to understand. Okay, yeah, in general, I agree with you, Frank. Yes, helping others is our purpose, which is the theme of the book, right? Is that ultimately we all have one deep purpose that's universal, that is to help each other as much as we humanly can, to be of maximum usefulness to other people. And that I believe is the lifeblood of the human experience. Great. Where do I go from here? And so that's when the weird started to become important. You see, because if you think about the purpose as one axis, the other axis has to be the passion. Because if people are not alive, they don't have that energy flowing through them, they don't have the maximum thing that they can use to help others. They can help others, but they usually burn out, or they get tired, or they get hurt.
So I want you to give us the 15th century spelling of Y.
Of weird.
I'm sorry, weird. 15th century spelling of weird, where it came from, and how you've leveraged it. Because this is something that I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, how are we not going back to the old spelling?
Well, because it would sound like wired. So a couple of things. First of all, the Old English word. Now, this is not an Old English dictionary. This is my wife's Encyclopedia Britannica, but it looks like an Old English dictionary. So I just grabbed it. So anyway, in here, you could find the word weird. It's the only place you would find it except for the internet, but it's Old English. It's WYRD. So this is the thing most people don't know. And I didn't even know this. I started loving my weird because I realized I'd been living this inauthentic existence. And I went through the divorce 8 years ago, and I went through all these different things. And so I realized, holy crap, all of this is happening because I no longer had the situation where I no longer had a situation where I could continue to live in this existence. And it was a lot of it had come from going years, really abandoning and pushing away that weird kid that I was when I was younger. Like a lot of it was around that. Okay. And we're going to circle back to that. So that's where it started. I was still thinking the original word weird, right? That's a weird kid. Everybody said you were weird.
And when you were working in all these like homeless shelters with your dad and all these things, right? What was the weird thread? What was that?
Okay,
what was the
hold that thought. Hold that
your
thought.
weirdness?
Yes, hold that thought. Part of my weirdness is that I jump around topics. So I'm going to answer your first question, okay? Because one time I remembered you asked another question. We're going to get right back into that. But the original word weird was spelled differently. It wasn't until Shakespeare's Weird Sisters that it became this negative connotation, right? And so before, it wasn't just spelled differently, WYRD, it had a different meaning. It meant the power to control or influence your fate, destiny, and my personal favorite, supernatural qualities, i.e. your genius. Essentially, your weird is your genius. And this is something that so many people underestimate, especially the people listening to this podcast, especially the people that you work with. Because most of us, when we get spit out the corporate back end and we get spit out of the system and we feel lost in the matrix all of a sudden, one of the reckonings is realizing, I mean, who am I? What am I? Right? We didn't even got into why am I, but at the end of the day, these are the types of things that like, okay, whoa. And so I think that life, the universe, whatever you want to call it, allows for us to go through these moments because we'll really get into the questions, not so much the answers, but the questions, because those are the most powerful components. So you said something about, you were asking about my childhood. So you'd done some research, which I love. And you found out that when I was a child, there were some different things than I did from when I'm an adult. And one of those was growing up with this innate sense of purpose with what my parents did, serving the poor and homeless in the inner city, homeless shelters, things like that. So I grew up seeing what living a why would look like. Problem is, my dad got kicked out of his own mission when I was 18, plus we never made any money. And so I was like, well, this is bullshit. And so I did the opposite. I said, I'm never going to be poor. I'm never going to not have money. And therein lies the journey of the mortgage business, right? And we know how that ended. So I had to kind of refine myself and be like, why am I here? And so it's been an ongoing question. It's an ongoing question, right? I'm asking it again right now. What is the deepest, most meaningful calling on my life, on your life, on the people's lives that feel like they don't have value anymore? All of a sudden people had all this value and now they feel like they don't have value. And so when I'm trying to figure out who I am, one of the best ways to do that, Lauren, is to actually go back to before the conditioning started. So it's a while back for some of us, but 5 or 6 years old is before the mass conditioning started. Okay, now I'm not blaming schools or anything like that, but school creates a condition where like make believe is not the priority. Make believe is no longer the priority. Play is no longer the priority. Getting something done that we can see, touch, feel, and add up and say and communicate appropriately. Those are the things that become the hero. And so we're all of a sudden spit out of that system, and we're wondering why we don't have imagination. Why don't we show up as our authentic self? Why is it so hard to collaborate and experiment and like step into fear of failure? Why is that so hard? Well, it's obvious, right? And so I had to have a reckoning with that 8 years ago. And that's where Love Your Weird was born, which was after I'd already done the why stuff. Okay. And what I realized is that if you don't understand your weird, you cannot fulfill your why.
Okay. I need to like double click on that. Say that one more time. Go ahead. Bring it back.
If you don't understand your weird, you cannot fulfill your why. Because it's the cross-section where the magic happens.
What will be missing in that? And how do people get?
Here's what's missing. You either have somebody who knows that they're weird, loves their weird, loves and is passionate about what they do, but they're not focused enough about being of maximum usefulness to others. Or the more common one is that they do want to help others. They do want to be helpful to people, but they keep feeling horrible doing it, or they keep burning out, or they keep being destroyed internally. And they don't know they're weird. They don't love their weird. They hide their weird. And so
if you had to define your weird, like give me your weird nugget. I want to know
here we go. So where do we start? You start with, okay, what were you into at 5? So for me, I was into time travel. I was always trying to invent time machines. This is my flux capacitor right here. Huge fan of Back to the Future. So I built multiple time machines. I built hoverboards. I built jetpacks, all kinds of stuff. So I was an inventor. Also was always trying to go to space with Giorgio. He was always the co-pilot. So I was an astronaut. I was an inventor. I also was a cowboy. And I also was a TV preacher. Because back then in the 80s, they were still cool, right? Before they started stealing the airplanes and stuff. So that was what I was into. Now, that wasn't necessarily has to be what you want to be when you grow up. It's just that's what I was into. So that's a lens or a glimpse into something that before anybody told me that was weird, which they did at school, both kids and teachers. And before that started to get muted, not so much like I was blessed enough to not have that be from my parents. My parents were pretty cool about loving their weird. And so I had a little bit of a leg up there. I'll be honest. I didn't have as much conditioning and trauma that a lot of the people I work with do have. Yep. And so I want to honor that for a second too. Like some people have a hard time remembering what they were into at 5 or 6. Mm-hmm. And that's because their mind and their internal emotional system has protected them from that, which can be a good thing. It was designed to protect. It's actually connected to the ego. But it can also work against us when it's too rigid. And
just so you know,
yeah,
I wanted to be Lori Partridge. Like my weird was I just I want to wear those go-go boots, and I want to be center stage, and I don't even have to sing or anything. I just want to be part of the vibe.
I just want to be.
Yeah, I just want to
yes.
And you're really helping me today.
I feel like you already, in many ways, are doing that. Like you are living, at least in this moment with me, part of the vibe. You just want to be part of the vibe, be part of the movement, part of the community. And that's what you love. But my guess, Lauren, is that you went through a season in your adult life when that was not the case. Big time.
Bam. Yeah. Yeah,
okay. Lauren, you live in Asheville, so this is kind of a layup. I mean, who are we kidding here? Asheville is the real weird. Austin thinks they're weird. Asheville's the real weird. I was there a couple months ago, and I was like, holy crap, this is maybe the love your weird capital of the world. So you're kind of a layup, okay? But look, you weren't always like that. You weren't always there. There was a time that broke you, probably. And you've probably told some of your audience about it. You can tell me about it now if you want, but that's what it is.
I think it's relevant because I grew up in preppy Massachusetts. My dad was a Harvard Business School professor.
Yep.
I was told to straighten my hair and wear the pearls and all the things because that would help me legitimize myself as somebody who is intelligent, somebody who had a level of worth or value. Somebody who, was smart enough to be a a good employee, a great leader, maybe somebody's, arm candy. I don't know. But I got to a place where I got very rebellious around that and started really getting to the place now. Like, you tell me to go straighten my hair and I'm going to tell you to F off.
That's right.
Not in a mean way.
Yeah. Right. And that's because there was a pretense. So you and I grew up the same way as different pretense, but all of us grew up with some sort of pretense and expectation. And it's like our first move is to try to step into that until we can no longer do it. And you have a choice. You can either volunteer to move into it, which most of us don't, or it will break us. And many of the people you work with are at that breaking point.
And so what can we say to them in the remaining few minutes that we have left that says to them, maybe something along the lines of, you can fight it. You can fight it for as long as you want. But what is the upside that is available to them when they are both embracing a level of disruption and seeing it as an opportunity to access their weirdness for unimaginable wins? Because what you have described in your life, it was never on your radar.
That's right. It was not
on
until
every
it
level.
had. Yep. So here's what I would leave everybody with. It's like, first and foremost, take this moment as a gift to go deep dive into who you are. Who are you? And start with who you were at 5 and piece together where that kid went. Maybe that kid's still there. There's 2-3% of the people I meet, like yourself, Lauren, they're living their weird. I tend to attract the weirdos. Okay. And so here you are, right? So I tend to attract the weirdos and in a great way, the WYRDOs and the people that love their supernatural qualities, the people that are living in their genius, right? It's not the piercings and the outward stuff. You don't have to look weird to love your weird. So if you're worried about that, you're listening, you do not have to look weird to love your weird. Has nothing to do with the way you look. You can look weird. That's fine too. We're here for all of it, but it's an inside job. And so the first thing I have to do is figure out, who am I? What have I lost along the way? And how can I start to embrace that again? When was the last time I played like I did back then? And luckily, a lot of the people listening to this maybe don't have a lot more time than they used to have. So go play. First of all, go play. Okay, go play. Go lean into your weird again and play with that. But I also want you to think. Yeah, go ahead.
I gotta just I'm so sorry. But I'm just imagining that the person listening to this is saying to themselves, oh, good for you, Frankie, because guess what? Corporate America and, these kind of confines that I'm in this job search, they're not exactly raising their hand and saying to me, oh, yeah, come do your weird. So how do you reconcile those two things?
First of all, weird is the surprising thing on the inside. Think of weird like inside of the Trojan horse. I'm not telling you to throw a weird flag up on your resume.
You.
Yeah, you don't have to do it. No, that's not what I'm talking about. Think of your resume. Think of your thing that you do that you're an expert at as your Trojan horse. Okay, this is the Trojan horse. Make that attractive. If you're an expert at peak performance, you're an expert at leading teams, you're an expert at health and wellness, you're an expert at business growth, whatever you're an expert at, don't lose that. Lead with that, especially as it pertains to how it can help the person on the other end of it. So when we're talking about why, here's the why as it relates to the Trojan horse. Make sure it's clear why you do what you do and what you're going to do to help them. So don't lose that. You want that Trojan horse to be so attractive that they just wheel that thing in. Let's wheel it in. Now, once that bitch gets into the city, watch out at night. That's when let them get that thing into the city. Then the little men going to take over the whole thing. Okay. So I'm that. Don't get me wrong. I am a pro at positioning. Okay.
Exactly.
And that's the key. The weird is the secret inside. It's the guts that creates the butterfly. Yes. So
I was going to think it's like the Cracker Jack with the surprise inside.
Yes.
Right?
I'm not saying
you
have
buying the Cracker Jacks for the surprise, but the fact that you got one is like a bonus.
So, all right, corporate America, you want to know how you get a job? Let me tell you. You walk in there and you make it matter less. You got to make it matter less. Period. Full stop. You walk in there and you're like trying to be buttoned up and you need this job, you're fired. If you come in and you don't need it And it doesn't matter. Because when you were a kid, when you were 5 years old, let me ask you this. How much did you give a shit about a job at 5 years old?
Not at all.
Goose egg. You did not care. You did not care. So I bet this might be exactly what you need to walk in with. How do you know this isn't exactly what corporate America needs in a world of everything that's the same? So don't underestimate what the weird flag can do. Do not underestimate that. But go back to it, because you have to reconnect. We have to reconnect with ourselves if we expect to show up in our full genius, because that's the objective, everybody. How do I show up in my full genius, which is my weird, in the service of others? That is the miracle of bringing weird and why together, is that I'm bringing my full genius, which all of us have. All of us have a genius. We've just unlearned it. We've just blocked it out because we didn't think it had value because they told us it didn't. But genius is exactly what is celebrated. But remember, it's celebrated in hindsight. So how do I show up with my genius in the service of them? It's not just genius. You need to believe me. Genius.
Right.
Look what I've done. It's genius in the maximum usefulness service to others. And when you show up like that, as with your 5-year-old self, where this doesn't matter as much, where you make that matter less, all of a sudden, that's a moment that you're connecting at a high stakes moment. I'm not downplaying the fact that your audience, your clients are in high stakes moments.
For sure.
But most people think that in high stakes moments, I need to go harder. I need to do more. Lauren, I call this brute force. And brute force will not get you to the next chapter. Brute force can work in the early days when you're building out the first things of it and all this other stuff. If you're at this point in your career, you've been in this a long time, brute force is not going to get you to the next phase. It's not going to happen. And so you've got to do something different. And you've got to do something surprising. And if you're wondering what that surprise is, it's be who you are, as aligned with yourself as possible, showing up in the service of whoever it is you're showing up for.
Frankie Russo.
Let's see what happens.
I wish you were like right here, right now,
Me too.
in this here food court, in this here Hotlanta place, in the middle of a big disruption that you have literally walked me through, both privately and right here this week. And I just want to say thank you from my heart of big hearts to and for you. And thank you for everything that you do for so many people, the acts of service that you bring on stages and otherwise. And listeners, if you love this episode, man, oh man, please make sure that you follow Frankie. Watch his TEDx's. I'm going to put them in the links below. You'll have all that. And by all means, hire this guy for your next keynote, come hell or high water. And lastly, one more thing, if you haven't subscribed already, do that now and write a review, because we are literally growing by leaps and bounds, and we are like leaving that BS of old career advice.
Yes.
To some other point in time. All right.
Yeah. And some other consultant.
Some other person that just wants to not play weird. So with that being said, big love to you, Frankie, so much. Thank you.
Oh, listen, thank you so much for having me on this show. This was totally a surprising, amazing experience with you. And just for everybody out there, if you remember nothing else, remember this: your weird is your superpower in this new world of work.
Awesome.
Thank you for joining today. We appreciate your listening ears. Big time. We ask this: use these tools, not tomorrow, right now, and share them by spreading the love, leaving us a rating and subscribe so you don't miss the next career blast in a half. Most of all, thank you for you.